Every so often, a game comes around that is so technically proficient, so fluid, so beautiful, and so damn charming, that it leaves a lasting impression in a way that is monumentally difficult to convey with words. Kena: Bridge of Spirits is that game for 2021. So much so that if it manages to resonate with you like it did for me, it will likely be in your top 10 games of all time from here on out. Hey there everyone, it's Livid here, and today I'm going to try my very best to tell you why you absolutely need to play Kena: Bridge of Spirits. Normally we begin our reviews by posing the question, is this game worth your time? I feel so strongly that everyone needs to experience this game this time that we are leading with that right out of the gate, and I will attempt to justify that. Somehow, a brand new studio, Emberlab, made up of top-notch animators, has managed to produce a title that runs so incredibly well with stunning visuals amidst fluid combat that it is truly worthy of being called a next-gen title. Now I'm talking no crashes, no bugs, maybe one or two drop frames between the CGI animated cutscenes and returning to in-game engine cinematics. That's practically a needle in a haystack these days when it comes to games. I won't lie though, when I first started Kena, I wasn't expecting something as wonderful as it turned out to be. With review embargoes that were set to go live on release, and a review code that dropped into our inbox only an hour before the game released, I honestly feared the worst for a game that was one of my most anticipated this year. Now before we get into everything, let's do as we always do. Take a look at this game with a 30,000-foot view to examine what it's about before we drill down into the systems that make this such a stellar title in its genre. You play as Kena, a novice spirit guide with the ability to communicate and interact with spirits, acting as a literal bridge to help them find peace and pass on to the next realm. Despite being on a journey of her own to a sacred place of power, she comes across an abandoned village, afflicted by a corrupted force, leaving spirits trapped between worlds, unable to pass on amidst the chaos and decay. As you work through the struggles of your own past, you must also untangle the secrets of this long-forgotten community while healing the land around you. Armed with ethereal abilities and an ancient staff passed down to her from her father that has been in their family for generations, you'll wield it in various fashions to fight back the corruption at every turn. Now you won't do this entirely alone, however. Almost immediately, you'll encounter and befriend creatures known as the Rot, adorable little beings that I'm not ashamed to say that I want a statue of because of how cute they are. Contrary to their name, they actually enable Kena to remove corruption and heal the land around her, and also prove to be key allies for solving puzzles and taking on enemies. Think a more focused, maybe more simplified version of Pikmin, in a game others will likely say is a mashup of Zelda, Metroidvanias, and Dark Souls. Now that still doesn't do this game justice, but it gives you a solid jumping off point. Rot are hidden in all sorts of locations and objects, from rocks and chests to lamps, shrines, and much, much more. Now they are not only key companions for solving puzzles and tackling the variety of enemies in the game, but they also serve as a key component for progression, something that we'll talk about a bit later on. Throughout your adventure, you'll find yourself experiencing the world through the stories of individual characters, with each region being both a self-contained story and adventure, but also contributing to an overarching story about just what happened to this village. Through the use of Pixar and DreamWorks quality cutscenes, these developers managed to convey such poignant stories full of emotion and digestible beats that it left me glued to my screen wanting to learn more and more about this expertly crafted world. I found myself becoming attached to every single character I met along the way, something that really isn't easy to accomplish in this space. But being a studio with a background in animation and animated shorts, they absolutely nailed it here. Every single cutscene, in-game cinematic, and little snippet of dialogue I experienced in this game made me appreciate the absolute heart and passion that went into crafting it. Now, story isn't the only thing that took my breath away. The environments in this game are something that you need to just see to believe. To say I found myself stopping countless times throughout my adventure just to take in the world in Kena is an understatement. Gorgeous, technically proficient vistas, winding paths and rivers through dense forests, and a vast, sprawling village that somehow invokes a Studio Ghibli vibe at each and every turn are just some of the environments that you can expect. It genuinely feels and plays like a world crafted by the talented minds over at Pixar or DreamWorks. Seriously, every single place that you turn your camera to in this game, you can take a screenshot and be like, damn, that's an awesome photo. Now I can't stress enough how incredible this game looks. Dark, stormy forests illuminated by flashes of lightning as you chase after a spirit, or the liberal but intentional use of God rays in so many locations to just make you stop and appreciate what's in front of you. This even carries over to the platforming elements within the game. Climbable cliffs and ledges are so expertly tied into the environment that even sometimes at a distance, you won't realize that there is a whole platforming puzzle coming up on some of the larger set pieces. The fact that puzzles within these environments also genuinely feel different, despite having similar mechanics such as using a bomb to make platforms float, hitting a crystal with an arrow to make it light up or spin to trigger a mechanic, or even stringing together bow shots while slowing time in the air to grapple between locations. There are even instances of portals needing to be used while managing all of these same elements at the same time while an invisible clock is ticking down. As a studio that is made up of mostly animators, it comes as no surprise also that this is one of the most fantastically animated games that I have played in years. Characters and cinematics convey emotion and intent with subtle actions like turning of their head or raising an eyebrow. In-game, they move, talk, and interact with you at such a high level of fidelity that I kept having to remind myself, this is a new studio. Even the rod. Can we talk about the rod for a second? They are so adorably animated. Every single time that you find a new one to add to your team, there is a custom animated scene. Now sure, they make the same expression pretty much every time, but some of the locations that you find them in and how they respond to you finding them left me not even fazed by that little grievance. You'll find these little guys hanging out on rocks as you're walking by, ledges as you're praying not to fall, and even just hanging out on the edges of bridges, taking in the day. The sheer amount of variation in these little guys, both ambiently and scene staging, is just insane. Talk about being constantly immersed. Character movement overall also feels really solid, but to be honest, it felt a little limited and slightly rigid at times. To be fair, I'm a keyboard and mouse guy, and movement is usually a lot smoother when using a controller in action-adventure games, but it's just not my playstyle. I was so enamored with the world, I blew past most of the menus just so I can get to the game. And that's probably why I also missed some of the essential controls like sprint. I spent a good chunk of the game at a slower pace, but that movement definitely feels like an intentional element, as it helped aid me in both taking in my surroundings more clearly and avoid missing the numerous hidden collectibles and puzzles scattered throughout the environment. Overall traversal, in the air, on land, or in the water, all flowed so fantastically, but this is just the beginning. Combat is also extremely fluid, and at the start, you might feel a little bored with how basic it all feels, but that's because you have so much more to unlock in your skills from both a combat and puzzle-solving perspective, that the deeper you get, the more interesting combos and solutions you can pull off. With all of that in mind, I think this is the perfect time to talk about the combat and progression systems. Like I said, the combat is incredibly fluid, and a lot of that stems from the fact that your skill set comes from only your staff, your spirit shield, and occasionally a bomb or two. This makes weaving between all these tools easy and allows for you to focus less on what buttons to press and more on what route do I want to take for this encounter. Most games get over-encumbered by numerous states of weapon swapping, but these developers just seem to understand flow. That's not to say you don't need to concentrate, because you certainly do, given your ability to dodge and iframe certain attacks, or use your shield to perfect block an attack, resulting in a parry. Your melee and ranged abilities are only ever a single button away, yet they all perform distinct functions in and out of combat. You start off with a basic light and heavy melee attack. Soon after, you acquire the ability to use your staff as a spirit bow, which opens you up to ranged attacks and puzzles, the ability to temporarily slow time, and even hookshot around like Link using your arrows as tethers to these vibrant spirit flowers. Later on, you acquire spirit bombs, allowing you to not only make environment pieces levitate and rearrange in the air for dynamic platforming, but you can also use it on enemies for AoE damage and even putting them in stasis fields to reposition yourself for weak spots and bursts of damage. You also have numerous upgrades that don't exactly change how you approach most combat instances too dramatically, but do end up giving you a nice variety of options. Some also definitely matter in certain instances, like the ability to use your bomb to break the armor off a target, exposing their weak spots, or the ability to distract one enemy with your rot companions that then makes all of your ranged shots on that target hit everything else around it. It does a good job of not shoehorning you into just light and heavy melee attacking everything, but I also wish there was a bit more upgrades that could make combat a little more flourishing, instead of the same 3-chain light and heavy instances. The combat tuning is also spot on. So many games really struggle with this, and in nearly every instance here, I'd find myself on my initial attempt either just barely scraping by a fight with a little HP left, or making a few critical errors that led to the enemies quickly getting the upper hand. I of course opted to play this on a higher difficulty, which I certainly recommend for anyone who is well versed in Souls-like games. And for a first-time studio, this game is so shockingly well tuned. This is largely in part to how smartly designed and varied the enemies are. Basic enemies, which come in numerous different flavors, spawn to just in general overwhelm and distract the player. Now each one has distinct movesets with very clear visual and auditory reads, which means it's really intuitive to learn each enemy and how to fight them. Shield enemies need to have their shield or armor broken to be attacked from behind, otherwise attacking their shield and armor will actually stagger you. Ranged enemies are also really well varied. Some attacks you need to outright dodge, some move more slowly and can be shot by you to detonate them, and some even impact the ground and require you to move out of the way or face a huge explosion. Toss them all together in a fight, and things get really hectic. Then there are elites, which you'll begin to experience about 3 to 4 hours in, and will become significantly more densely populated the further you go, and are almost like constant mini-bosses. Now their health pools are nothing to scoff at, but each one has distinct mechanics to either make it vulnerable or weak spots that do a sizable chunk of damage and causes a temporary stagger effect. The important thing though is that these weak spots can never be used to outright kill an enemy alone. There are limited amounts on each elite. Around 50% of their health can be knocked out with these. That means your knowledge of your abilities and evading your enemy's abilities through timing play a key role in taking them down. Last up are the boss encounters, and I want to just be brief here and not spoil anything for you guys. These can range from pretty beefy, hard-hitting elites with limited movesets and are a bit cumbersome, to enemies more in line with Dark Souls in the major story bosses. These require you to be extremely competent in managing your resources, parrying and dodging effectively, and chaining together your skills to effectively deal with them. Honestly, every boss has been fun as hell to fight. When I die, it's 100% my fault, and that feels good. With all of that in mind, if there was ever a sequel to this game, which I hope to God there will be, combat, despite my praises, is probably the one area that I'd love to see significantly expanded on, just to make it deeper. Another portion of action-adventure games to critically look at would be their progression systems. For Kena, it goes hand in hand with combat, in that I would like there to be more elements for progression. What is there, however, does the job, and it does it quite well. Outside of the main combat, abilities like your melee, shield, bow, and bombs that can all be upgraded, one of the key elements of progression is your rot companions. As you befriend more rot in the environment, your rot level increases, allowing you to unlock more powerful abilities and have more rot courage to use in combat. Rot courage builds up through successful attacks and even blocking. Sometimes even enemies that you kill can also drop rot courage. You need this resource to perform any rot-fused attack, bind enemies, and utilize healing pods during combat. Through the upgrade tree, you can learn to infuse your attacks with rot, allowing them to deal more damage and even stagger enemies. For melee, it infuses your heavy attack to deal massive damage and hit enemies at a distance. A rot-infused arrow will hit much harder and even pierce through all enemies in its path. Finally, rot-infused bombs will create an AoE stasis field on detonation, slowing enemies and projectiles while allowing you to move at full speed. In order to make all these upgrades, you'll need Karma, a resource acquired by clearing corruption from flower shrines, repositioning owl and cat statues, restoring garden patches, defeating enemies, and finding various things for your rot to eat. Gems, another resource, are also found all around the world in random objects, shrines, chests, and various other hiding spots, and are merely used to unlock rot hats that you've discovered all over the world. Yes, you can put a huge variety of different themed hats on your rot, and it's adorable. Lastly, meditation spots are secluded, peaceful areas that you'll generally find after either major boss battles or hidden deep in the environment after a series of puzzles that'll grant you permanent increases to your health. Like I said before, I wish there were deeper systems at play here, but for what this game does have, it works incredibly well and doesn't at all detract from the overall game experience. Now, while we're talking about the overall game experience, the last thing that I want to talk about in this review is the music and sound design. The music in this game is absolutely incredible, full stop. This is animated film quality level, yet again, and it even dynamically reacts to your situation, crescendoing as you get closer to a threat or as you progress further in a tense combat situation. Each piece of music perfectly fits the mood at the current time, depending on what story is being told. This is a masterclass in game scoring. My only qualm was that sometimes the music is on equal levels with the dialogue, so at certain moments, it can be hard to clearly hear what is being said. The sound design, however, is superb. I often say with action combat games, if you can't visually read or hear the various attacks coming from both yourself and enemies, then they might as well not have made an action combat game. It is critical that you have auditory cues that are unique to each enemy and attack, so that when you aren't seeing them on screen, you could still react accordingly. The team at Emberlab understand this completely and execute it flawlessly. Seriously, everyone, well done. At this point, you already know Kena Bridge of Spirits is 100% worth your time. So much so that it has cemented itself up there as one of my favorite games that I've played and experienced in the last decade of gaming. Kena isn't breaking new ground by being different. It's elevating the entire gaming experience by proving that storytelling, mixed with responsive systems and a masterful execution across the board, can still resonate with players, even if this game looks like a kid's game on the outside, but much more than that on the inside. Maybe the more animated vibe isn't your thing, and I can respect that, but the story, puzzle solving, and action combat is so well done that you would be doing yourself a disservice not to give this one a shot. And for those that think graphics for some reason trump everything else, something I've never really understood as an argument, well, this one is downright gorgeous as well, so no excuses there. Besides the fact that it's only on PC, PS5, and PS4 currently. Now hopefully this comes over to Xbox at some point so you can all experience this. Let's just hope that we get a sequel, because I think this world is so fantastically unique that I just want more. Anyways, friends, if you do still have questions about the game, or maybe you're still on the fence for whatever reason, shoot me a message in the comments and I'm happy to help you make a decision about this game. That's why we do these reviews. I also want to say that if you did like this video and you want to help support the channel, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. We've got a lot of exciting content coming up this fall and you don't want to miss it. My name is Livid, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching and play on.